Welcome back. Today's podcast is all about communication. What we're going to be focusing on with you today is what to say and how to say it. Tongue-tied to triumph, real estate communication secrets. So, Julie, what motivated you to come up with this great topic?
Well, probably gajillions of coaching calls, texts, emails, commentary from the coaches. And the overriding theme is that many people don't know exactly what to say or how to say it. They know what they want to say, but they're afraid of maybe how they're going to come across, how it's going to be perceived. Maybe they're too strong. Maybe it's a personality style thing. It all comes down to upgrading your conversation skills.
Okay, so the punchline is going to be basically that you should be using scripts, and scripts are nothing other than conversation outlines. Essentially, it's almost like you're an actor in a play and you're reading a script that is written that's going to result in a specific outcome, right? So
Absolutely.
Why is it that agents are so apprehensive in general, in your opinion, to use scripts? And it's not all agents.
Nope.
It's certainly not seasoned veteran, high-end agents.
Mm-hmm.
It's mostly new agents. Why are they apprehensive about using scripts?
Well, I think it's because they believe it'll make them sound too mechanical or too, not their personality, that sort of thing. And they're afraid that they're going to have to memorize all of this stuff and they're going to miss a word and it's not going to come out right. And I really think it's a lot of analysis paralysis. Whereas what you said is also true. The more grizzled veterans and experienced agents, they use scripts all the time. They just don't realize it because they've been doing it so long and they're so effective at it.
They've internalized them.
They've internalized. So when you are memorizing, when you're learning scripts, you have to understand it first, memorize, and then you can internalize. And not until you've done that can you personalize. A lot of agents try to skip straight to the personalization because they don't want to sound mechanical. You have to understand the intent of a script, and all scripts are intending to do is to create conversation where you can get the facts out and determine whether you're able to help your prospect. And then that'll lead to closing on some sort of signature on a listing contract, on an exclusive buyer contract. That's all scripts are conversation outlines that lead down a path where you will either turn them into a client or you won't.
And if you're apprehensive about using scripts, you are using scripts. They're just scripts that you basically are winging as you're talking with a buyer or seller. And maybe sometimes they work, but you're going to discover that once you know what to say and how to say it, your success rate with having conversations is going to go through the roof. So why would you procrastinate? Why would you try to recreate the wheel or create the wheel in the first place of your own scripts? Or even worse, go to a bunch of people that really have never sold real estate before, have no real track record of helping other people sell real estate, and listen to what they say. So you got to be really careful about where you're going and getting your information, and being very, I think, selective on, don't try to cater your scripts to your personality, because what Julie said was important. You want to memorize it, you want to internalize it, and then you want to personalize it. So if you're just looking for the personalization aspect or wanting it to sound like you're going to lose the essence of the script, which is, frankly, helping the buyer or seller, you're going to ask questions that's going to lead them to a desired result, which is them buying or selling real estate, ideally with you. So, Julie, let's get to the first point.
You got it. So, number one, again, we're upgrading your conversational skills. Number one, listen to understand, not just to respond. That happens a lot when they're learning scripts. They're just so anxious to respond with the next script question. But you've got to listen to understand. How do you do that? Well, you deep dive into their needs. Using buyer and seller pre-qualification scripts, for example, to uncover the client's desires. Think of yourself more as a detective, piecing together the clues to get the full picture. Listen attentively and take detailed notes of your prospects' responses.
Do you remember the first listing appointment we went on? I know this is like 1,000 years ago. Do you remember it? It was like a cookie cutter in my house.
Yes, I do.
I think it was an expired.
Yes, it was.
Okay, and we obviously called and proactively lead generated to set the expired appointment, and it was literally our first listing appointment.
Yeah.
And technically it was our second one because Carl was our first.
That's true.
Yeah, but that
our first non-center of influence one.
Right, our truly competitive one.
Yes.
And it was when we were brand new agents. We looked like we were like 12. I mean, the two
You
of us
especially,
together.
yeah.
Right. And we had studied different scripts and we'd been exposed to a little bit of training, not ever any coaching. Coaching wasn't even around when we got into business. And I remember we were so excited to be on a listing presentation. And what was really mesmerizing for both of us was that the training we had read, and we'd listened to some tapes, remember this?
Yeah.
That it was playing out exactly like we'd been trained. In other words, the seller was saying exactly what the trainer and the tape said they were going to say in the exact order. And Julie and I are like peeing ourselves, so excited to listen to it. It was working. It was like a perfectly orchestrated textbook dance. And I remember at one point, I was so excited that I think I actually said out loud what I knew the seller was about to say based on just the rudimentary training we'd already had, and they still listened with us. And afterwards we asked why they listened with us, and you know what their answer was? It wasn't our brilliant script, so it was their energy and enthusiasm and our excitement. You remember that?
They seemed excited, which a lot of that was nervous excitement, but at least we converted it to the real thing.
And we got the listing. So yes, but that's all really a script is. So if you've got it in your head that you didn't get into real estate to sound like a cheesy salesperson and all the rest of it, you haven't really landed at the fact that your job as a real estate professional, as any kind of sales professional, is to help other people. You're still focusing primarily on yourself. How do I feel delivering a script? How will I look? It's all an ego thing. Really, all a script is, it's like when you go to a doctor's office, you're having any sort of important conversation. You want the conversation to result in your problem being solved or you being able to solve somebody else's problem. And why wouldn't you want to use a script if it's going to help you get there quickly, more efficiently, and more professionally? Of course you would.
Of course you would. And on that note, interview both partners. If you're talking to a husband and wife, for example, when you're working with a couple, interview each person separately, or you can kind of go back and forth if they're in front of you together. But your point is to ensure that they're on the same page. It's like playing matchmaker, but for dream homes. Make sure you're paying equal attention to husband and wife until you sort out how that dynamic is going to work. Next, ask probing questions. The more you learn before working together, the smoother that relationship and transaction will be. Now, I love this. I call this a micro script. Ask if there's anything else you should have covered. What else should I have asked you that I haven't already? What else should we have covered that we haven't already? This will avoid some surprises. I remember several different instances. Typically, this would happen at the end of a listing presentation where we're gearing up to get the signature. Is there anything else that we should have asked you that we didn't? And I remember a couple of different instances. One of them was everything had gone textbook, but the seller said, well, we're not 100% sure we're actually being relocated yet.
Well, but this is when we were new, and this is when we didn't know how to pre-qualify at the highest level, things like that. But really, our whole real estate system as far as Premier Coaching teaches you how to proactively lead generate, teaches you how to pre-qualify. And so you're not going to leave anything to chance. By the time you're actually sitting in front of a prospective buyer or seller, you don't want to really have any unanswered questions. You're going to want to pre-qualify them to learn more about what their priorities are and what's important to them, what they're looking for, all the rest of it. But if you're sitting in front of a prospective buyer or seller, at that point, they should have 99% have already at least mentally and emotionally committed to working with you. That's the reason you send your pre-listing pack ahead of time. That's the reason you send your pre-buyer pack ahead of time. Next point, Julie.
Well, so ultimately, you will have identified their priorities by the end of those pre-qualification discussions. You should clearly understand what's most important to your clients. That way you can actually deliver on it. Point number 2, clarify communication preferences.
But Julie, this is so important that sometimes agents are going to be nervous about using a script. And what we tell even on a listing appointment, what we tell them is not be nervous about it, even if the buyer or seller sees that you're reading from a script. Our scripts are, when you look at our pre-qual scripts, for example, they look like questionnaires. Mm-hmm. And so if the buyer, don't be embarrassed that the buyer or the seller sees that you're using your questionnaire. That's actually going to have the exact opposite effect on them what you think. They're going to see you as a professional. They're going to see that you took the time to actually get to know what their wants, needs, hopes, and desires are. They're not going to disqualify you because they see that you're reading from a script. Our scripts, like you ask a question and there's a blank where you write in the prospect's answer. That's the way it works. You think that's not going to make them see you in a higher standing than somebody who's just winging it and talking about their golden retriever?
Well, in fact, they'll disqualify that person because they didn't have a clipboard with questions. Think about all the professionals that you come across. Your doctor's asking you questions about your symptoms. You go to the dentist, they have things that you have to fill out before you get whatever procedure it is. Even when you go to the spa, the girl who does your facial or your hair asks you, do you have any allergies? What are your preferences? Do you have it's normal to have those questions and write down the answers. Don't wing it. Don't be the one who doesn't do that.
I don't get facials and I cut my own hair, so.
Well, let's see. What would the dude equivalent be?
Adjust accordingly.
Adjust accordingly. All right. So point number 2, and this is really important. So many communication foibles happen right here. Clarify your communication, their communication preferences. Understand their preferred method. Actually ask them, do you prefer texting, emailing, meeting in person, or being on the phone? If texting, clarify the platform. WhatsApp, Messenger, SMS, all of the other ones. I've had so many coaching clients say, well, I thought they were ghosting me and then I opened WhatsApp or then I opened Messenger and, I never checked my Facebook Messenger and that's the only place they found me. So clarify, how are you going to actually communicate?
And that, by the way, is part of what we want you to use, whether you're, in your buyer pre-qualification pack or your seller pre-qualification, your PLP or pre-listing pack. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, join Premier Coaching. But we want you to have in there an actual communications guarantee where you're going to say how you're going to communicate with them based on their particular preferences, and then take it to the next level. Take that actual page in your pre-listing pack or your pre-buyer pack, and then make that into an NCR. Make that into something where they're going to check the way they want to be communicated with you, and you're going to sign it and they're going to sign it. That's a USP, because the number one complaint that folks have about real estate agents is after, when you survey them after the closing, is the communication sucked. They don't like, and it's not that your communication necessarily was bad. It's just that you weren't communicating with them the way they wanted to be communicated with, which is super annoying considering how many different ways there are to communicate.
Yeah.
That's the reason Julie and I, 99% of the time, will always tell you guys to make the phone call, because then you know that they've listened and you've conversed with them, but you want to ask them so they can show preference, and you want to definitely have a phone call at a pre-scheduled time as an option. These little tiny things will take more time, but they're going to often be in a competitive market like this. Every market's competitive, but this market especially so. It's because, there's fewer homes for sale, and frankly, there's fewer qualified buyers available. You're going to want to make sure that you are showing that you are taking the nature of your relationship with them to the next level. Here's my communications guarantee. How would you like me to communicate with you? That, again, with the other things we've prescribed for you to use, are going to be oftentimes the things that make the difference between you getting that committal and you not getting that exclusive with that prospective buyer or seller.
That's right. It's all about setting communication standards and expectations so that you don't mistakenly get ghosted or have them perceive that you're not communicating just because you're not even on the same platform. You want to put that in your communications guarantee.
There's never been a buyer or seller that said, I heard too frequently from my real estate agent. Ever. That's never happened. Like, if you have a real estate agent or if you have a buyer or seller say, damn it, Bob, stop calling me all the time trying to be of help. I mean, that has never happened.
It has never been said ever.
I mean, poor Bob.
Poor Bob, indeed. We challenge you. Try to over-communicate.
We were in a situation recently where we're with Zoe, and we came across someone whose name was Bob. And she was like, she thought Bob was just a made-up name. And so she was standing between Julie and I, and Bob was in front of us. And all of a sudden, I feel these big green eyes glaring, burning like lasers on the side of my head. And I look down, and then she goes, she had this look of wonderment on her face. Like, she mouthed it to me. She didn't say the word. She goes, Bob?
She's finally met him.
She finally met Bob. She's like, oh my gosh, is this the Bob you guys talk about on your podcast all the time?
Isn't that funny?
That was hilarious, wasn't
I know.
it?
She's very frosty. That's I remember when she asked me about the client named Scam Likely. She's like, why don't you ever talk to Scam? Like,
no, it's because it shows up at Julie's phone when she gets a spam call. Obviously, it shows up Scam Likely, and so Zoe thought that was a real person, and she asked Julie why she doesn't like talking to Scam Likely. She thought that was a name.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
All right, the things they pick up on. All right. Number 3, with your communication skills, be the solution, not the problem. Minimize stress. Real estate transactions are stressful, even for experienced clients. Show compassion without becoming overwhelmed by their emotions. Think of yourself as a real estate superhero swooping in to save the day.
Well, that's show emotion without being emotional.
Exactly right.
Yeah, you should write that down. That's really important. What'll burn you out is if you look, you can show them. Where we learned this, I'll tell you, is we had one of our initial year in real estate. You could tell it was a rough one, but we still sold over 100 homes. Yeah. We had this seller that was legitimately going to lose like $85,000 on her house, and she had to sell it.
Yep.
And she was incredibly emotional about it. It was expired. I think it had expired twice. And we took the listing and we got it sold, but it took a huge price ectomy, and it was really just super sad and hard, and everything about it was bad. She'd lost her job. She had just all these life changes, and she was constantly emotional. And I remember we went to our broker, Rory, and we explained the whole thing to him. And he said, was very clear, very, direct. He said, your job was to get the property sold. Now, what you got to learn is show emotion without being emotional. What does that mean, Rory? He said that you're going to run across people all the time that are very emotional, because buying and selling real estate for many people is massively stressful. You can show compassion and emotion to them, but don't internalize it. Don't make it your emotions. So you have to be like a professional, like a doctor or anybody who's, providing high level professional services to somebody. You can, again, be compassionate, show emotion, but don't internalize it, because then you're giving up your own life energy. You will be burned out all the time. You won't have the emotions for your family, for the next client. Again, remember, monitor yourself. Show emotion, but don't allow it to become your problem. Their problem is not your problem. Their emotional distress, it should not become your emotional distress.
That's a really hard thing to learn too, especially as you do more and more transactions, because you'll run across this more frequently.
A lot of the amiable sorts think it's a point of pride that they internalize other people's emotions.
It's not.
It's not. It's unprofessional.
100%. If you need more help with it, that's why we have coaching, because, we actually sold real estate for a living, and we do understand these emotions and thoughts and stress.
We've had, I don't even know how many coaching clients at this point, tens of thousands.
Yes.
We have a lot of coaches. Everyone's, all of our coaches sell real estate. They all are going to, frequent these problems that you guys are sometimes faced with. And sometimes just knowing that you're not alone in a market like this, being able to communicate with someone that's been there and done that, and actually, showing emotion to maybe your temporary issue, and they're not internalizing it, you watching them act professionally, that'll be modeling for you and how to behave going forward. A lot of the reason that I think so many agents are joining our Premier Coaching Program right now is they really do want a sense of community in a marketplace like this. They want to be attached to something that's going to uplift them and help them to get the next level in their business and personal lives. And, I think probably 50% of you listening are Premier Coaching members, I'm guessing. And congratulations. Make sure you're attending your daily coaching sessions. The rest of you, it's very easy for you to join Premier Coaching, especially since the first month is free. Just scroll down below in the show description and click the link that says, join Premier Coaching, or you can just go to premiercoaching.com. And like I said, the first month, which includes a daily semi-private coaching call every workday, is free. So join Premier Coaching today. Julie.
All right. So again, be the solution, not the problem. Communicate frequently. Tim just challenged you to try to over-communicate. Regular updates, even if there's no new information. I would say almost especially if there's no new information. Reassure clients that you're actively managing their deal, because no news doesn't have to be bad news. Here's the thing. If they don't hear from you, they're never thinking good things, ever. So make sure they hear from you.
They're building resentments.
That's even worse.
Yes.
That's
it's the old horrible, what have you done for me? Janet Jackson, what have you done for me lately? If you're not communicating with them directly, they will absolutely start to basically be passive aggressive. It doesn't matter what their personality style are. They're going to resent you, even to their own detriment. They'll start ghosting you. They won't, do price adjustments when it's necessary. The listing will expire. Then that, $10,000 price reduction that you have been begging for them to give you will instantly, the new listing agent will get not just a $10,000 but a $20,000 price reduction.
And then it'll sell.
They'll sell it the same day. Why did the seller act that way towards you? Because you weren't communicating with them, and because they basically grew to resent you. That's what happens.
And for that reason, we have the Seller's 12-week communication plan as part of your Premier Coaching. After, I find it's even a shorter amount of time after, the FOMO of previous markets. After about the second weekend, agents run out of things to talk about, and that's why they start to not communicate, which puts them on the fast track to either being fired or expiring.
Well, it's because they're worried that the seller is going to start getting pissed at them and ask them, what have you done for me lately? And that's the whole point of following our coaching program with the 12-week seller communication guide, because we wrote down what you're supposed to say, how you're supposed to say it, when you're supposed to say it, in anticipation of what they're going to be thinking a week from, in the future, 2 weeks in the future. Mm-hmm. We know what the seller is going to be saying to you as the listing sits on the market for maybe 5 days to 10 days to 15. And you're taking that point of contention that might be festering for the future, and you're resolving it ahead of time by saying, well, things like, the seller eventually is going to say to you, well, why, Julie, haven't you been showing my house? Mm-hmm. Well, the script is but you say this ahead of time. If you're basically dealing with that objection when and the seller's asking you that, you've already probably lost that relationship. They're already working on hating you. So you need to say to them, this is like when you take the listing, Mr. Seller, now remember, I might not always be the agent that's showing the house, but I am the reason it's getting shown. And that's what my marketing plan does. So every day I'm putting all my best efforts into making it so that you have qualified showings for your property. and then listening what the market feedback is, and then advising you on, if we need to pivot in one direction or the other. But a bulk of my time is spent looking for qualified buyers. Maybe they're working for me. Maybe they're working with another agent. The reality of it is that is my primary focus. So remember, I might not always be the agent that's showing the home, but I am the reason the property is getting shown. You say that ahead of time. And when the third week rolls around with, maybe not as many showings as they're anticipating or no offers, you will have already worked through that inevitable resentment that that they're going to be thinking about you. Why isn't Julie showing up and showing the property? Why do Julie? Now you have to do open houses every single day. You're going to lay that out ahead of time. So when you're following our approach and you're being coached by us, we know where the points of contention are going to be in that relationship as you move forward. And a lot of you aren't even conditioned to have longer term relationships with your sellers. Our coaching program is designed so that you can not just take the listing, but you can actually be the listing agent when it sells, which, by the way, is the greatest secret with being successful in real estate agent long term. If you want to know the greatest secret, I just told you, but I'll say it again in hopefully a funny way. If you want to know the secret to being a successful listing agent, it's this simple. Be the listing agent when the property sells. Which means if you aren't the listing agent when it sells, you're not getting paid. And that means you let it go because you got fired or because it expired. Either way, you're not the listing agent when it sells. So you got to keep that seller happy. It's one thing to get the listing. It's another thing in a changing market like this to be the agent that has the listing when it sells.
That's right. You don't want, typically the weekend goes like this. After about the second weekend, maybe the third weekend, where there's, the couple sitting out at dinner at Saturday night and they're thinking, gosh, I wonder if the house is going to sell. I mean, we had some showings. What do you think's going on with that? And the other partner says, well, I don't know. We haven't heard from Bob in 3 weeks.
Or even worse, they're out with another couple, and the other couple who, are friends with 14 other real estate agents. This is how it's always the case. And one of them they play tennis with every Saturday. They're going to say, you know what? I'm going to have Betty give you a call.
Exactly.
And then the next thing you know, you're now having competition, and you have other agents that are whispering in that seller's ear and might even be working against the advice you're giving, anticipating that seller's going to fire you, and they're going to, Betty's going to get the listing. That's the way the cookie crumbles.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. All of you have been collectively hoping and praying for more inventory, haven't you?
It's coming.
And now that there is more inventory, along with more inventory comes longer days on the market.
And more expired listings.
With both of those things comes the necessity for you to upgrade your conversations. Okay. Number 4, be a problem solver when things go sideways. Not that ever happens in real estate, but let's just say. So be a problem solver when things go sideways. Report with solutions. Never deliver just bad news. Always follow up with 3 possible solutions. Be the wise owl in the real estate forest.
Oh, that had to have been written by ChatGPT.
It was.
Okay.
Yes, but I remember, we learned this. It usually comes out with lower than expected offer or an inspection problem or an appraisal problem or a finance problem.
Julie's using ChatGPT to basically be her writing assistant and helping to
make it more fun.
Make it more fun. Yeah.
Yes. So
when you hear Julie say something that's partially whimsical, it's probably not Julie's script.
More than likely, but I am learning. I am learning from that. So when you have solutions, and let's see. I've had several of these happen in the past week with coaching clients. Don't just say, hey, here's what the problem is. Actually, that's happening with our Dorado agent here. She's got a financing deal going sideways.
And we're not supposed to say her name. It's top secret that Julie's
She's
coaching
incognito.
her. Yeah.
So what my coaching is don't just call that listing agent and say, here's the problem. Talk to the buyer's lender first, get 2 or 3 solutions, state what the problem was, get an extension, and be the solution. Okay.
What's the price of the property out of curiosity?
$1.3 million.
Oh, okay. Well,
it's fixable. I think it's fixable.
That is financeable.
It is. Yeah. It is. But so the point is, don't just be the messenger with the bad news. Say, I found this issue. I've been working on it for the past day and a half. Here are some possible solutions.
Your job is to not throw the stress back on the client, is what Julie's trying to say. You have to let them know of the problem, but then give them the solution. But I will say where that doesn't necessarily apply is with home inspections. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you had a technique when Julie and I would typically carry 15, 20, sometimes 30 listings. One time we had close to 100 listings. And you would get home inspections on the resale homes primarily that would come in that had all kinds of different issues. And then, of course, sometimes the seller would be a different mindset about whether or not they're going to fix it or whatnot. So Julie devised a very simple, almost passive-aggressive way of dealing with, home inspections. She would send the home inspection report that came in from the buyer's agent over to the seller, and just basically the exact whatever we got. We're not trying to prune it or make it look pretty, just whatever whatever it was, went right over to the seller, and then simply say, here's the home inspection report from the buyer. What do you think? Okay.
I know. Now, what do agents usually do? And honestly, I used to do a bit of this before too, because, nobody likes a crappy home inspection, right? So agents usually go, oh my gosh, they found all this stuff and I don't know what we're going to do with this, and drama, stress, which the seller's going to feel anyway. You're just making it worse. Instead, you present it, including whatever the buyer's grocery list is, and you just say, what are your thoughts?
Yeah.
And here's the shocking thing. I never believed that. I mean, the first time I did that, I was like kind of skeptical about it. Here's what will happen. The seller will usually say, yep, we knew about those things. We're working on it. Or here are the receipts. We just had the HVAC serviced, whatever. Sometimes they'd say, well, they didn't find this or didn't find that. But most of the time, they actually were more agreeable than what they would do if you pre-stress them out.
In other words, if you went to them and said, like, oh, here I'm going to prove my value. I'm going to negotiate a property inspection report. I'm going to bring a bunch of stress to the seller. And you go to them like you're, some kind of master negotiator. They ask for all these things. I think these things are going to cost like 15 grand, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to grind them and only agree to fix these 5 things and blah, blah, blah.
Or we're going to just say no.
Right. Now, don't do that. Just send it over to the seller and see what the seller says, and you'll be shocked and amazed how frequently they will just agree to basically do all of the work because they already knew the work needed to be done. And also remember, I don't want to talk about inspections anymore after this because we got to get back to our points, that once the seller knows of a problem from an inspection, they're going to have to update the property disclosure form, which means the things are going to have to be fixed anyway, because now if this buyer flakes out and they have to go find a new one, that all future buyers are going to know that they're going to read the updated property inspection report and they're going to see what was wrong with the property. So the seller at that point doesn't have any choice but to get the problems fixed anyway. So just keep all that in mind. Let's go on to point number 5.
Okay, point number 5, our final point today. Watch your language. Words matter. And this falls into several categories. Generally speaking, have a policy of no swearing. Even if your client swears like a sailor, maintain professionalism. Remember, you are the classy captain of the ship. Thank you, AI, for that one too. Okay, use logical language. In stressful situations, rely on logical rather than emotional language. Be the Mr. Spock of real estate. So this comes down to not speculating, not making up emotional things. Just state the facts and ask their thoughts.
These last two, 4 and 5, are all basically the mistakes that people make when communicating, because agents are they think the value that they bring to a transaction is going to be drama. Agents are the reason a lot of stress, unnecessary stress is brought into a real estate deal. You're being paid not to bring stress into the deal. And even if you feel a little bit out of sorts because you're earning a lot of money, you have some internal strife with the commission you're making or whatever it is, whatever your internal dialogue or psychology is, there are all kinds of reasons that agents love to bring drama. Mostly it's because they want to feel like they're important. If you bring all that stress to the buyers and sellers, the deal might still close, but you are not going to get referrals from that person because they're going to remember that you brought them stress. You made them feel uncomfortable, and they will hold that against you, and that will be the only deal you ever do with them, assuming that deal closes. And if it doesn't, don't be surprised if they get rid of you and find somebody else because of the fact that you didn't alleviate that stress and take care of that problem ahead of time. They don't want to hear the problems from the deal. The problem resolution is what you're getting paid to do.
And deals, by the way, will always have some stress in them. I don't think we ever closed a perfect transaction. It's normal and natural. Think of all the moving parts that happen. I remember our title agent counted one time that there are more than 200 entities that were part of a closing between title insurance processors, mortgage people, whatever, and that there were more than 400 conversations between agent and agent, home inspector, appraisal, all of these things. So naturally, there's going to be stress. Stop believing that there's not. I remember Rory told me that once. He said, your problem is you think everything's going to go smoothly.
Well, it's because you're analytical in how you think.
Yeah.
But also, when you're bringing drama to a relationship, a professional relationship, what you're really exposing yourself for is inexperience. Imagine going to a dentist and the dentist takes your x-rays and they come in full of drama. I mean,
holy cow, I can't believe what I saw.
Exactly. I mean, you're going to get the hell out of there, aren't you?
Yeah.
Professionals do not wrap themselves in drama. They take it, they internalize it, run it through their professional filters, and then they tell you the best plan of action. Really, it's not selling. None of what Julie and I teach you guys how to do is sell. What we teach you how to do is consult using essentially proven techniques. And the proven techniques fall under the guise of scripts, which a lot of you guys will over associate with, sales techniques. But really what we're doing is we're teaching you how to consult with your buyers or your sellers. Tell them what the challenge is. Give them 3 solutions. Tell them what solution, like with each solution, here's the pluses and here's the minuses, right? And then tell them the one that you'd subscribe to them. And 99% of the time, they're going to listen to what you say.
There you go. Well put. So again, under watching your language and words matter, be factual. Avoid speculation and words like guess, suppose, or maybe. Promise to follow up once you have more precise information. When you use words like that, guess, I suppose, and maybe, and we'll see, and maybe we'll find out, you're just creating more uncertainty, which of course creates more stress. And finally, regroup when necessary. If you need a moment, say something like, I'm about to lose reception for a couple minutes, I'm going to call you right back. Use the break to formulate a more clear plan before continuing the conversation. Think of it as a pit stop before returning to the race.
So let's give them some advanced coaching. Number 1, if you do receive a very high energy, nervous, ego-filled, whatever from anybody, it's in your voicemail, they've sent you an email, do not respond. 100% do not respond, because you don't know what's going on in their life the moment that they were, hitting the keys for the message or leaving the voicemail. Do not respond. Give them some cooling off. Call them back an hour later, unless it's something truly urgent, right? You know what I'm talking about. Like if it's a termite guy or something like that, then you can respond. But I'm talking about from agents in particular. You're getting drama from other agents, give them a cooling off period, because you'll call them back and you'll miraculously find that they solved the problem or the problem solved itself. Number 2, you got to set up boundaries with your clients. And one of the scripts we give all of our coaching clients is on your voicemail. Some of you don't use voicemail anymore. You just text and whatnot, and that's fine too. Have an autoresponder that shows up every day at a specific time, or on your voicemail. It says, hi, this is Tim Harris. Thank you for calling. Please leave your name and your number, and I'll call you back at my earliest convenience. If you're calling after normal business hours or in the nights or the weekends, please leave the best number for me to reach you in the morning. That's it. Because you're setting boundaries. You're not going to be there 24 hours a day. You're not going to be a Pop-Tart realtor. You're not going to work every night, day, and weekend to answer their questions about whatever it is. You're setting up boundaries. They want to know the boundaries in which you're setting. They want to understand how to work with you. And where agents will make the mistake is they'll do what I just said, and then they'll start calling and following up during the times in which they said they weren't. Then you're going to give away all your freedom. You can do that digitally as well. You can have an autoresponder that pops up after a certain time in the day. Set the boundaries. Be a professional, because again, you tell me a professional that works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, who has no boundaries. That's not a professional. If you want to make it so that people have more respect for you and your time, and they put more value on your services, do what I just suggested. Imagine if you're trying to work with someone to provide a problem for you, and their professional services are available to you anytime. You put less value on them, because you got to assume they're not doing anything else, or they wouldn't, or obviously they wouldn't be able to answer your question at 3 a.m.
Yes. Well, that said, when your message says, leave your phone number so I can call you the following business day, make sure you call them the following business day and do what you say that you're going to do. You've got to have both sides of this.
Remember, you're setting nights or the weekends. You're deciding when the time zone is. You're saying if you're calling after normal business hours. You're not saying, don't say if you're calling after 5 o'clock. Just say you're calling after normal business hours. You set the boundaries, and you'll be surprised. Even the most particular buyer or seller, they'll actually appreciate that, and because you give them expectations of when they should hear back from you. Otherwise, I text you at 7 o'clock, and if you haven't gotten back with me that day, then somehow
you're horrible.
You're horrible, exactly. It's your fault for not setting up those ground rules when you start that relationship with that client. Hopefully, this podcast today really focuses in your mind how important it is, especially in a market like this where there is a lot of stress, there is a lot of, I think, uncertainty for a lot of real estate agents. You're going to have to be the purveyor of high-level communication with your fellow real estate practitioners, but also with your buyers or your sellers. Don't allow your stress to become their stress. Don't allow their stress to become your stress. Remember, show emotion without being emotional. That's really, if you want to know what the je ne sais quoi or the secret sauce that some top producing agent has, it's a lot of what we just prescribed to you and described for you today on this podcast. Take this information, use it as intended. If you want our notes from today, you know what to do. Subscribe to harrisrealestatedaily.com. It is our daily newsletter where all of our podcast notes live. harrisrealestatedaily.com. You can scroll down below, click the link to join, or you can just go to the website harrisrealestatedaily.com. In the meantime, please remember to give us a 5-star review over on iTunes. We certainly appreciate all the wonderful feedback we've been getting on our podcast over the last 90 to 120 days. We promised you we'd drill down more. We promised you we'd give you more actionable information because we know a lot of you are living through times of uncertainty. And I think based on the feedback we're getting and all the wonderful reviews we're getting, some of you are really starting to have your breakthrough moments that you've always hoped and prayed you'd have in your real estate business. So go you. The rest of you, this is your opportunity to be part of the new real estate market. Have a fantastic day. We'll talk with you on the show tomorrow.